When I first started this channel, it had absolutely nothing to do with gaming. I mean, the thought of making gaming videos was, quite frankly, I was out there somewhere. I wasn't even playing games at the time. It didn't occur to me to make a channel about playing games. I know Joe had been talking about it. Joe ended up doing it, but I wanted to make vlogs. I wanted to speak to people who were out there and say, look, here's some really great stuff, and look, here's what's going on in the world. And, well, I did that for a while, and I had a lot of fun doing it, but I found that it was very difficult to keep up. In 2016, I wanted to expand what I was doing online, and so the first thing I thought, well, let's bring back that vlog. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the first of the new series of Mr. Stephen Has an Opinion. I don't know what that sounded like because I can't hear that when I'm playing. That was really annoying. I shouldn't have done it like that. Anyway, yes, if you could read that incredibly short introduction, what I'd like to talk to you today about are the 3 books that changed my life. Now, this is something that I think that anybody could pick up on and do books that changed their life as well. So if you have books that you would like, make a video about. If you have books that you would like, of course you have. If you have books that you'd like to talk about, make a video about it, make a post somewhere, stick it in the link below. Let's share these around with people. This is almost a new tag, 3 books that changed your life. Let's make this happen. But I did want to talk about these things mainly because, the media that we ingest every day helps to inform who we are and what we do. It doesn't necessarily, change us. You wouldn't read a piece of media and go, oh, yeah, well, killing's all right then, isn't it? Because, that's not how we work as human beings. But artistically, it can inform what we like and where we go with our artistic freedoms. So it's really, really important to talk about these things. Recently, I heard a Neil Gaiman video, which he was talking about 3 books that had actually changed his life. And it was very interesting. I thought that's great. Because books do change people's lives in various different ways. And so I thought I'd talk about the 3 that have changed mine. The first on the list is an old, very battered copy of something which I think it was the first time that I'd really understood what science fiction was and had sought something out because it was science fiction. But not only that, because it was funny and because people recommended it to me as well, which obviously had a bit of a huge impact. The book is The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Here it is. It's not an Earth book, never published on Earth, and until the day of the terrible, stupid catastrophe never seen or heard of by any Earthman. I can quote sections of this book. That's how well I know it. That's how much I read it when I was... God, £4.50 I paid for this. Well worth it as well. It's not a long book, coming in at nearly 160 pages or so. But it was the book that led me to the radio show, that led me to, it's something that made me want to write, quite frankly. It's something that inspired me enough to make me want to go out and do creative things. And that's wonderful, when you get a book like that is actually engaging with you so much that it actually makes you want to go and do stuff. That's a fantastic thing to find. Douglas Adams was a real hero, I suppose is probably right. He was the lost member of the Pythons, as some people have said. He was the script editor of one of the best seasons of Doctor Who, also one of the worst, but that's by the by. So he wrote for Doctor Who. He wrote The Hitchhiker's Guide. He wrote copiously on technology. He loved technology. He was a real technophile and would embrace as much of it as he could. And there are very few people around who seem to be doing that. I mean, people like Stephen Fry, who is a contemporary of Douglas Adams, and the two apparently got on very well together. So, it's not just that particular book that changed my life. That particular author really did. But if it hadn't been for Hitchhiker's Guide, I wouldn't have found that. Because what I was looking for at the time was something funny and something spacey. And there wasn't really anything else out there. Sure, there was Red Dwarf, but it wasn't quite in the same league as Hitchhikers. It never has been. And as much as I love Red Dwarf, it's a great show. But you will never be able to top jokes like what's so bad about being drunk? Just ask a glass of water. My second choice is actually a Terry Pratchett book. Now, Terry Pratchett, again, is another author who I started reading when I was young, and I just continued reading. And his work has actually influenced work that I've done. The reason that I write steampunk stories, and people might not know this, but I do write steampunk stories. The reason that I write this is because I wanted to write Discworld fanfic, but I didn't want to write fanfic. And the only other way of doing that is to set something in a historic world. And so in order to do that and to stay historically accurate, you've got to change the world somehow. So alternative fiction and steampunk just kind of fit into that mold somewhat. He's incredibly funny. He's incredibly intelligent. And the book... The specific book I've chosen is actually Men-at-Arms, which is the second of the Guards books. The Guards books were always my favourite. I don't know what it was about them. There's several sets of books. There's the Rincewind books, which is sometimes just known as the Wizard books as well. There's the Witches books, which are amazing. But there's something about the Guards books. Perhaps it's because in each one they've got a murder and you've got to solve it. I don't know. But it's something to do with that really made me latch on to them. This is my copy of Men-at-Arms. I've got 2 copies of Men-at-Arms. This is the one that's barely been opened because actually inside it has a signature from the great man himself. Now, Terry said on several occasions that actually he signed so many books that books without his signature in were probably worth more. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but I hope so, because most of mine aren't signed by him. That's the only one that I've got signed, and it's I treasure it. I really do. Terry was, again, it was reading his books was kind of a way forward from Hitchhikers. I'd read all the Hitchhikers books. Douglas Adams didn't write anything particularly didn't write a lot of books that I could sort of get hold of, and Terry Pratchett, there was one out every year, so it just made sense to sort of follow what he was doing and to read his books. Having said that, I came to the Discworld books pretty late on. I think it was Eric when I read the first one I read all the way through, and even then I didn't quite get it. Previously I'd read Guards, but I couldn't really remember it. And then Men-at-Arms came along, and Men-at-Arms was the first Discworld book I kind of picked up, and I went, oh, I get it, this is what it's about. And so I went back and sort of read all the other ones. And I don't think that you forget your first Terry Pratchett book. I think that is always going to be the one where you got it is always going to be your favourite Terry Pratchett book. The Discworld series is remarkable. The breadth and depth of these worlds that he creates, which is essentially a satire on our own world, they're absolutely fantastic, and I wouldn't hesitate to recommend them to anybody. They can be, in some respects, a little bit too intellectual. There are things in Discworld books that I've discovered along the way. I haven't known about something, and then suddenly I'll read something somewhere, and I go, oh, that's like this bit in the Discworld, and it turns out, yeah, it's exactly like this bit in the Discworld. That's the point. So anyway, yes, Discworld books, Men-at-Arms in particular, was a big influence. And one that you always hope to emulate something. If I can emulate Douglas Adams and Terry Pratchett, then, well, dear God, that would be astounding. The last book that I've chosen is actually probably a little bit out of left field, and they're books I hadn't really read until a few years ago. But they're actually very, very important books, because there is a thing at the moment, there is a genre at the moment that is becoming one of the top genres in science fiction and fantasy, and that is urban fantasy. The idea that is right; it's right up there. What we used to tell as stories to scare children was, "Don't go into the forest." And we said that because the forest was a scary place at night. And not only that, most of the places that we lived were surrounded by forest. So there was a good chance that children wouldn't go into the forest. Well, we don't live near forests anymore. Okay, well, I do live kind of near a forest, but it's not within walking distance. Fewer people live within walking distance of a forest than don't. I think that's what I'm kind of getting at. Most people live in urban situations, in conurbations, in cities even. And urban fantasy takes the myths and the monsters that you would get in those old fairy tales or old monster legends about vampires and werewolves and things, and it sets them against the backdrop of a modern era. Now, the author that I chose wasn't the first person to do this, but he was certainly the first person that I saw doing it. Even so, I didn't realise what I was seeing at the time, because what I was actually watching, and I've got it down here, was this. The Dresden Files series of TV shows. It was just something that came up. Sure, you had things like Buffy the Vampire Slayer to begin with. On television, it's happened, but in books, it didn't happen, and I kind of thought it couldn't. So when I sort of found out a bit more about the Dresden Files, I thought, oh, that's a really cool thing. It's something that I needed to read about. Even so, it was only a year before last, I think, when I first picked up the Dresden Files as audiobooks. Really, really well read by James Masters, who is Spike in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, doing Harry Dresden. So the book that is the third one that changed my life, I haven't got a copy of it, but here's a picture of what the front cover looks like. It's the first Dresden Files book. By Jim Butcher. And Jim Butcher is the man that a lot of people credit with the start of this urban fantasy thing. And I think that without him, the genre would be a lot worse off. From his books, it's gone on into... There's a lot of British writers now writing urban fantasy about, places around London. There's Ben Aronovich, who writes the Peter Grant books, which are also known as the Rivers of London books. Paul Cornell's written a book called London Calling, and then there's the second one whose name I've forgotten. Here are the Courts of the Fairy books, which are by Mike Shevden, I think, which are fantastic. There's the Alex Verris novels by Benedict Jacker. But I don't think that we would have such a clear understanding of what urban fantasy was if it wasn't for Jim Butcher, who really did write an incredibly brilliant series of books in the Dresden Files, and I'm always looking forward to the new one now, which is going to be written after he's written the one that he's writing at the moment. So anyway, those are my 3 books that I have changed my life. They haven't always changed my life by being startling moments of revelation, but they have done something that has allowed me to... Actually, in my case, they've allowed me to creatively go to other places. I wouldn't have thought of writing urban fantasy if it wasn't for Jim Butcher. I wouldn't have thought of even looking out other urban fantasy books if it wasn't for him, because you see what you see on TV and you go, oh, well, you're kind of stuck with Buffy the Vampire Slayer or something like that. And what I didn't realise about the Jim Butcher books, and what I didn't realise about Hitchhiker's Guide, and what I didn't realise about the Discworld books, is that they all stem from a love of 1980s science fiction, things like Doctor Who. They all seem to tie into that. And Doctor Who ties into this idea of urban fantasy as well, and it ties into this idea of alternative histories as well. It sort of takes all of that and pushes it as a genre. And I think because Doctor Who was such an influence, that allowed Douglas Adams to be such an influence, which allowed Terry Pratchett to be such an influence, and has come almost full circle to allow Jim Butcher to be a big influence on me as well. So those are 3 books that changed my life. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please like, share, comment and subscribe, and I will see you hopefully tomorrow when we're going to do our next Batman video. Until then, thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.